Around the world, there are prisons that are famous not only for their size or history, but also for the brutality they inflict on those incarcerated. These prisons are known as hells for prisoners, where violence, oppression, and harsh living conditions become an inseparable part of daily life. Many prisoners who have been held in these places have passed on a chilling warning. When you step into prisons like this, it's like you've signed your own death sentence. So how do these prisons manage to instill such extreme fear? And how have they existed in such a way to cause such terror? Let's dive deep into the details to uncover the truth behind this thrilling case. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any other exciting videos. The story unfolds inside ADX Florence, a notorious maximum security prison located in Florence, Colorado, where the most dangerous criminals in America are held. Built with the goal of housing the most dangerous criminals, this prison is home to notorious offenders, from international terrorists to organized crime members. Not only that, but the security system at ADX Florence is designed with maximum protection, to the point that only about 1% of prisoners ever leave their cells in a 24-hour period. All the cells at this prison are solitary, and each prisoner is confined to these individual cells day and night. The cells are equipped with minimal facilities. Each cell has a small window that allows the prisoner to see daylight, but only for a short time and from a very limited perspective. This contributes to creating a completely isolated physical environment. Prisoners are not allowed to have contact with others, except for guards and security personnel. This system of confinement is seen as a way to prevent any possibility of escape, but it is also one of the harshest methods of separating prisoners from society. ADX Florence is not just a prison with strict physical security measures, but also a place where high-tech systems are employed to monitor and control prisoners. The cells are equipped with camera surveillance systems and sensors, and all the prisoners' activities are monitored 24/7. Prisoners can only move between areas within the prison under close supervision, and any incidents are immediately responded to with security measures. In addition to surveillance via technology, this prison also uses a very detailed prisoner classification system. When prisoners arrive, they are classified according to their level of danger, likelihood of causing disturbances, and potential for escape. This helps the prison effectively control potential threats and minimize any risks of incidents. One of the most terrifying aspects of ADX Florence is the extreme mental isolation that prisoners endure. The lack of social contact, not being allowed to meet or talk to anyone except for the guards, creates an incredibly bleak and harsh environment. Prisoners can only communicate with staff through a glass window or small holes in the cell door, but there is virtually no opportunity to interact with outsiders. This is not just a form of physical isolation, but also a form of psychological torture. Prisoners who are held in these solitary cells for extended periods often experience severe mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and psychosis due to the lack of communication with the outside world and the feeling of being completely abandoned. This is why every prisoner brought to ADX Florence is overwhelmed with fear, and many break down in tears just mentioning the place. Like other notorious prisons, Gitarama in Rwanda stands out not only because of its violence and brutality, but also because of unique features that make it a special case among prisons worldwide, especially the disease outbreaks and extremely harsh living conditions that prisoners face. One of the most notable and concerning features of Gitarama prison is the severe overcrowding. This prison was designed to hold around 800 prisoners, but during peak years, the number of prisoners exceeded 7,000. Each cell, which is barely big enough for a few dozen people, contains hundreds of prisoners, making it nearly impossible to live in. With such a high number of prisoners, contagious diseases such as malaria, hepatitis, tuberculosis, and skin diseases pose a serious threat to the inmates. Moreover, the lack of medication, hygiene, and medical care has worsened the disease outbreaks within this prison. Prisoners suffering from serious illnesses often do not receive timely treatment, leading to a high mortality rate in the prison. Adding to the dire living conditions is the brutality between prisoners. The nickname, the Cannibal Prison, comes from the fact that prisoners face violence, not only from other prisoners but also in a struggle for resources, particularly food. The prolonged hunger has turned many prisoners inhumane, willing to attack or even kill others to secure their survival. In an environment rife with desperation and violence, relationships between prisoners have lost their humanity, becoming brutal survival struggles. Another prison notorious for its cruelty and chaos is La Modelo in Bogota, Colombia, where violence is an integral part of the prisoners' lives. La Modelo is divided into two main areas, one for black gangs and one for white gangs. Each of these areas functions as a separate domain with lords at the helm. This division is not merely geographical, but also clearly reflects the severe racial segregation within the prison system. Each section inside La Modelo operates under the rules of the respective gangs, creating an internal governance system that is incredibly harsh. Those who do not belong to a particular faction or lack the power to protect themselves quickly become targets of beatings, exploitation, or even assassination within the prison. This division has led to brutal clashes between gangs, resulting in bloody riots that the authorities could barely control. The largest riot took place in March, in the year 2020, when an uprising between gangs erupted, resulting in the deaths of 23 prisoners and injuries to dozens of others. The authorities were unable to stop this conflict, and violence became an inseparable part of life inside La Modelo. The living conditions at La Modelo are one of the factors that have made this prison infamous. Prisoners have to live in cramped areas, lacking food and water, and there is almost no intervention from the authorities to control the situation. Camilo, a prisoner at La Modelo, shared the suffering and hardships he faces every day in this prison. He said that each day is a battle for survival, where his life feels no different from death. Camilo has faced many challenges, from continuous abuse by other prisoners to pressure and oppression from the guards and prison gangs. His days there were not just about physical brutality, but also about mental anguish, as he could find no safety. Camilo also shared that one of the most valuable things in prison is the cells, because they are not only a place to stay, but also the deciding factor for survival. To sleep on a bed, he had to pay the guards up to USD per month. Without money, he had no choice but to sleep on the cold ground, a difficult and uncomfortable experience where prisoners had to endure dampness, cold, and deprivation. This clearly reflects the injustice and corruption in the prison system, where only those with money can enjoy basic privileges like a proper place to sleep. Not only does he struggle with poor living conditions, but Camilo also faces another harsh reality, the open drug and weapons smuggling within the prison. Here, criminal gangs run all activities, from drugs and weapons to controlling the lives of the prisoners. Prisoners like Camilo must protect themselves from threats, not just from other inmates, but also from the powerful gangs inside. The internal power struggles within the gangs, constant threats from the outside, and lurking dangers are an inseparable part of the daily life of prisoners in La Modelo. The authorities' negligence in controlling violence and harsh living conditions has turned La Modelo into one of the most dangerous places for inmates. Some prisoners have even been killed in their cells without any intervention from the guards. The violence at La Modelo has caused devastating losses of life and further intensified skepticism about the effectiveness of the criminal justice system in Colombia. The existence of La Modelo with all its problems has highlighted the dark side of the justice system in Colombia. It also raises many questions about human rights and the need for significant reforms to ensure the safety and rights of those incarcerated. A similar situation occurred at Karanderu prison in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is not only one of the most famous prisons in the country's history, but also the site of the greatest tragedy in Brazil's prison system. The incident occurred on October 2nd, when a riot broke out between prisoners within the prison grounds, leading to the intervention of Brazil's military police. Instead of quelling the riot through peaceful means, the police carried out a bloody armed attack. As a result, 111 prisoners lost their lives, most of whom were unarmed and were killed at close range. The Karanderu massacre shocked the world and remains one of the most severe human rights violations in Brazil. The police's handling of the situation and the horrific violence inside the prison sparked widespread protests from human rights organizations and the international community. Karanderu prison is seen as a symbol of the failure of Brazil's criminal justice and rehabilitation system, where prisoners were neither protected nor treated humanely during their incarceration. In addition to the massacre that claimed 111 lives, the living conditions at Karanderu were also atrocious. The prison became a hotbed for diseases, particularly the rampant spread of HIV/AIDS. The lack of medical care, food, and clean water made Karanderu a terrifying place for anyone incarcerated there. Those who could not withstand the pressures of the prison environment were quickly overwhelmed by the brutality and harshness of the place. One prisoner shared with reporters during their visit, saying, "When you step into this prison, it's like you've signed your own death sentence." Life inside this prison is unlike anywhere else, where the rules of society seem to no longer exist. In the year 2002, Karanderu prison was finally closed after many years of criticism for its inhumane conditions and the horrors of its management system. However, the massacre at Karanderu remains one of the darkest stains in the history of Brazil's prison system. Another equally famous name in prison history is Alcatraz. Alcatraz, also known as the Rock, is one of the most famous and iconic prisons in the USA prison system. Located on an isolated island in the San Francisco Bay, California, this prison became a symbol of maximum security and harsh living conditions. Designed to hold the most dangerous criminals, Alcatraz stands out not only for its advanced security technology, but also for its extreme isolation, making escape nearly impossible. One of the factors that set Alcatraz apart and made it famous is its location. Situated on a small island completely isolated from the mainland, Alcatraz is surrounded by cold seawater and the strong currents of the San Francisco Bay. This makes escaping from the prison nearly impossible. Even if a prisoner attempted to overcome the strong freezing waves, they would face the risk of drowning or being caught before leaving the surrounding waters. The island was chosen for its complete isolation, which not only prevented escape, but also made it difficult for external organizations to access the prison. Any escape attempt had to face harsh natural obstacles, further enhancing the prison's impregnable status. Even in the heyday of Alcatraz, no prisoner successfully escaped and survived. Furthermore, the cells at Alcatraz were small, lacking light and basic amenities. Each cell had only an iron bed, a sink, and a toilet, all placed in a very confined space. This cramped, barren space made prisoners feel suffocated and deprived of freedom, creating an intense mental environment. Combined with strict regulations and continuous surveillance by guards, prisoners here lived in a state of constant stress and complete isolation. Life in Alcatraz was not only physically harsh, but also mentally punishing. Each day, prisoners faced deprivation and immense psychological pressure. Moreover, due to the island being surrounded by the sea, Alcatraz's climate was also far from pleasant. In winter, strong winds and cold rain made the living conditions even more severe. Being incarcerated on an isolated island not only made it difficult to access supplies and medical assistance, but also increased the physical and mental suffering of the prisoners. Also in the USA, Rikers Island Prison is equally notorious, where violence and chaos are an inseparable part of prisoners' lives. Rikers Island is divided into various detention areas, including sections for detainees awaiting trial and those already convicted. Although many prisoners here are waiting for trial and have not yet been sentenced, they live in a violent environment where clashes, assaults, and even murders happen frequently. Violence between prisoners is a serious issue at Rikers, and guards often fail to intervene in time to stop these conflicts. Besides violence, Rikers Island is also famous for the abuse of power by the guards. Numerous reports show that prisoners are tortured both physically and mentally by the prison staff. Harsh punishments, such as prolonged solitary confinement, have led to severe mental health deterioration for many prisoners. This situation is especially severe for younger prisoners and those with mental health issues, leading to a high suicide rate at Rikers Island. The poor living conditions are one of the main reasons Rikers Island has been heavily criticized. Prisoners are forced to live in cramped cells, with poor sanitation and insufficient clean water and food. Rikers Island has become a symbol of the failure of the USA criminal justice system in ensuring human rights for prisoners. Many human rights organizations and social activists have called for Rikers Island to be closed due to its inhumane detention conditions and uncontrollable violence. In the year 2019, the New York authorities decided to close this prison in the year 2026 and replace it with smaller detention facilities, focusing on the rehabilitation and restoration of prisoners. But until Rikers officially closes, it remains a nightmarish hell for anyone incarcerated there. Meanwhile, in California, there is a notorious prison known for holding death row inmates awaiting execution. This is where some of the most notorious criminals in the USA are held, including serial killers, rapists, and extremely dangerous violent offenders. One of the most notable features of San Quentin is the execution chamber, where lethal injection is used to carry out death sentences. This is the site where many executions have taken place, becoming a symbol of the USA criminal justice system. The living conditions at San Quentin are also very harsh. Prisoners have to live in cramped and deprived cells. Although the prison has improved its infrastructure over the years, violence between inmates and oppression from guards still occur frequently. Another prominent feature of San Quentin is the racial segregation among groups within the prison. Prison gangs are often divided by race, and ethnic conflicts frequently lead to bloody violence. This violence not only makes prisoners feel unsafe, but also complicates the management of the prison. In addition to violence, San Quentin also faces issues with prisoners' mental health. Many prisoners endure significant mental stress, living in an environment that is tense and unstable. This has led to an increased rate of suicides at the prison, making San Quentin one of the prisons with the highest suicide rates in the USA. Another infamous prison in Southeast Asia is Bang Kwang Prison in Thailand. Located about 11 kilometers from downtown Bangkok, Bang Kwang was built in the year 1933 and was designed to house inmates convicted of serious crimes, including death row prisoners. This prison is notorious for its harsh management and the overwhelming fear experienced by those incarcerated there. Bang Kwang is one of the most brutal prisons in the world. Newly convicted prisoners, especially those sentenced to death, are often forced to wear leg irons during the first months of their incarceration, making every action incredibly difficult. Moving within the prison, even for simple tasks like eating or using the restroom, is a major challenge for inmates. Moreover, Bang Kwang is known for its terrible living conditions, with extreme overcrowding and suffocating heat. The cells in this prison are often overcrowded, with dozens of prisoners living packed into tiny spaces. For those incarcerated here, Bang Kwang truly feels like a prison with no escape. Similarly, the Attica Correctional Facility in Attica, New York, is known as one of the most dangerous and notorious prisons in the country. With the most serious criminals housed here, Attica installed tear gas systems along its hallways and workshop areas to prevent riots and conflicts between inmates. Although the prison has undergone some changes, overcrowding and violence remain significant challenges. Among the most notable prisoners ever held at Attica are Mark David Chapman, who assassinated music legend John Lennon, and David Berkowitz, the infamous son of Sam's serial killer. Likewise, the Kamiti Maximum Security Prison in Nairobi, Kenya, is known as one of Africa's most infamous prisons. Originally built to house around 1,400 prisoners, Kamiti's population has now swelled to about 3,600 inmates. This prison holds many inmates convicted of serious crimes, including rebel leaders. Kimathi was executed in the year 1957 and was one of the most famous prisoners at Kamiti. Despite efforts to improve conditions, Kamiti remains notorious for its violent history, uprisings, and constant conflict between prisoners and authorities. In the year 1971, a riot at this prison led to the deaths of 43 people, including 33 prisoners and 10 guards and civilian staff. Over the decades, Kamiti has continued to be a symbol of brutality and instability in Kenya's prison system. Similarly, the Tadmor prison in Syria is one of the most brutal places one could imagine. The number of deaths here is difficult to count because violence is an inseparable part of daily life for prisoners. Black prisoners are ruthlessly beaten, while political prisoners are left to starve to death. In the year 1980, after being unable to control the situation, the Syrian government had to use helicopters and machine guns to eliminate 500 prisoners in a brutal attack. Stories about this prison always send chills down the spine of anyone who hears them, especially Syrians. Around the same time, Camp 1391, also known as Israel's Guantanamo, was a prison operated by the Israeli Defense Forces, used for prisoners considered high risk. What is special is that the existence of Camp 1391 was only made public in the year 2003. Before that, it was completely secret, possibly due to the inhumane treatment of the prisoners there. According to former prisoners, they were subjected to physical violence and were kept in small cells with no light, no clean water, and faced prolonged solitary confinement. Although Camp 1391 ceased operations in the year 2006, the fact that this prison remained secret for such a long time has led many to question the truth behind it. No one knows if it was truly closed, and how the camp remained secret even when satellites could not detect it. Former inmates shared that they only realized they were confined within four walls when there was no contact with the outside world, creating an ambiguity and mystery around Camp 1391 that persists to this day. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story, and I'll see you in the latest video.